I'm going to tell you about something that should be impossible. Something that the Imperium has spent 10,000 years preventing. Something so terrifying that even speaking about it is considered the highest heresy. But it happened. I was there. I watched it unfold over the course of 3 years on a world called Sanctum Fortunae, and what I witnessed there, it changed everything I thought I knew about the Imperium, about faith, about the Emperor himself. My name is Interrogator Marcus Vale. I serve the Ordo Hereticus, and this is the story of what happens when an entire world forgets the God Emperor of mankind. It started with silence. Not the silence of death or destruction. Not the silence of a world gone dark from invasion or rebellion. This was something else entirely. Sanctum Fortunae simply stopped praying. For those who don't understand the Imperium, let me explain what that means. Every world in the Emperor's domain maintains constant communication through prayer, through ritual, through the Astronomican's light. The faithful send their devotions into the warp like a beacon, trillions upon trillions of souls, all crying out to the God Emperor on his golden throne. The Imperium can feel this. The ecclesiarchy monitors it. It's like a heartbeat across the galaxy, and Sanctum Fortunae's heartbeat just stopped. No distress calls, no invasion warnings, no signs of chaos, corruption, or xenos attack. The planetary governor's weekly tithe reports continued arriving on schedule. Trade ships came and went normally. Everything seemed fine, except the prayers had ceased. My Inquisitor, Lord Valdane, received the initial report 3 months after the first anomaly was detected. He read it once, went completely pale, and immediately ordered our ship to make for Sanctum Fortunae at maximum speed. "Sir?" I asked carefully. "It's just one shrine world among thousands. Surely this can wait until—" "Do you know what Sanctum Fortunae means in High Gothic?" He interrupted. "Blessed sanctuary, my lord. It was the first world converted during the Great Crusade after Terra itself." Valdane said quietly, "It has never stopped praying. Not once in 10,000 years. Not during the Horus Heresy. Not during the Age of Apostasy. Not even during the worst warp storms. Sanctum Fortunae has maintained unbroken devotion. For 100 centuries." He looked at me with eyes that had seen horrors across a dozen sectors. "Until 3 months ago, the journey took 6 weeks through relatively calm warp routes. During that time, we received updated reports from passing vessels. All confirmed the same thing. Sanctum Fortunae appeared completely normal in every way except one. Nobody was worshipping the Emperor, not in the streets, not in the cathedrals, not in their homes. The entire planetary population of 80 million souls had simply stopped. I spent those 6 weeks studying everything I could about the world. Sanctum Fortunae was a paradise by Imperial standards. Lush forests covered 70% of the surface. No hive cities, no industrial wastelands, no toxic zones. The population lived in harmony with the land, their entire society built around worship and contemplation. 3,000 cathedrals dotted the surface. The largest, the Cathedral of Eternal Vigilance, could hold 500,000 worshippers. Every citizen was required to attend services 3 times daily. Children were raised in scolums that taught nothing but imperial doctrine and theology. This was a world where faith wasn't just important. It was everything, and now it was gone. We made orbit on the 43rd day. Our ship's augers scanned the surface extensively. Everything read as normal, power output steady, communications active, no weapon signatures, no void shield activation, no signs of conflict whatsoever. It's like they're just living. Our ship's captain reported, confusion clear in his voice, going about their daily business. But the temples are empty. Valdane stared at the planet turning slowly below us. "Prepare my shuttle. Full security detail." "Interrogator Vale, you're with me. What are we looking for, my lord?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Proof that humanity can survive without him." The way he said it made my blood run cold. We landed at the capital city's main spaceport. The city was called Prima Devotion, a name that now felt bitterly ironic. The spaceport was functioning normally. Ground crews guided us to a landing pad. Port Authority cleared our entry without issue. Everything followed standard Imperial procedure. Except one thing. Nobody made the sign of the Aquila. Nobody offered benedictions. Nobody invoked the Emperor's name. The portmaster who greeted us was a middle-aged woman in clean, simple robes. She smiled warmly as we descended the shuttle ramp. "Welcome to Sanctum Fortunae," she said pleasantly. "I'm Administrator Kella. We've been expecting you." Valdane studied her carefully. "You knew we were coming?" "Of course. The Ecclesiarchy sent word 3 weeks ago that an investigation team would arrive. We've prepared accommodations in the city. I hope your journey was pleasant." Her tone was friendly, professional, completely normal. But there was something wrong about it. Something I couldn't quite identify. "Administrator," Valdane said slowly, "why have the prayers stopped?" Kella's smile didn't waver. "Prayers? I'm sorry, Inquisitor, but I don't understand the question. The prayers to the God Emperor. The daily devotions, the cathedral services, they've ceased." She looked at him with genuine confusion. "The God Emperor? I'm afraid I don't know who that is." The words hung in the air like a physical weight. One of our guards actually gasped. Another made the sign of the Aquila reflexively, as if to ward off evil. Valdane's hand moved slowly to his bolt pistol. "You don't know who the Emperor is?" "Should I?" Kella asked, still smiling that pleasant, empty smile. "Is he someone important? Perhaps from off-world? We don't get many visitors here, you understand? We're a fairly isolated community." I felt reality tilting around me. This was impossible. The Emperor's image was on every coin, every building, every piece of Imperial iconography. His face was carved into mountains. His statues dominated every city. "The statues," I said suddenly. "The cathedrals, the Imperial Aquilas everywhere. You see them every day." Kella followed my gaze to a massive cathedral dominating the skyline. Its spire reached 1,000 meters into the sky, topped with a golden Aquila that could be seen from orbit. "Oh, the old buildings?" she said. "Yes, they're quite beautiful. Ancient architecture from before the founding. We maintain them as historical monuments, of course. The craftsmanship is extraordinary. Before the founding?" Valdane's voice was dangerously quiet. "What founding?" "Why, when our world was first colonized naturally. About 300 years ago, according to our records. We don't know much about the original settlers. Most of the historical data was lost in the Great Silence. But we've built a good life here since then." 300 years. Sanctum Fortunae had been an imperial world for 10,000 years. Had temples and shrines dating back to the Great Crusade itself. Had records of every planetary governor, every saint who'd walked its soil, every miracle attributed to the Emperor's blessing. And this woman thought it had been founded 3 centuries ago. "Take us to your planetary governor," Valdane ordered. "Of course. Governor Aaron will be delighted to meet you. He's been quite curious about the Imperium. We so rarely get visitors from the wider galaxy." As we walked through the spaceport toward our waiting transport, I noticed more details. The workers wore simple, practical clothing. No devotional texts embroidered on the fabric. No prayer beads at their belts. No purity seals or holy icons. More disturbing, they looked happy, content, at peace. In all my years serving the Inquisition, I'd never seen Imperial citizens look so unburdened. The governor's palace had once been the Ecclesiarch's cathedral fortress, a massive structure of white marble and gold covered in bas-reliefs depicting the emperor's victories. Every surface had been carved with prayers and benedictions. Those carvings were still there. But as we walked through the corridors, I realized the inhabitants simply didn't see them anymore. They walked past images of the Emperor enthroned, surrounded by his primarchs, and their eyes just slid over them, as if the images weren't there at all. Governor Aaron met us in what had once been the High Ecclesiarch's meditation chamber. He was a tall man in his 60s with kind eyes and an easy smile. The kind of leader who genuinely cared about his people. Inquisitor Valdane, he greeted us warmly. And your associate. Please, sit. I've had refreshments prepared. I understand you've come a long way. We sat at a table that had once been an altar. I could see the faint outline where sacred texts had been inlaid in gold. Governor Aaron, Valdane began carefully, I need you to tell me about your world's history. Of course, though I'm afraid it's not terribly exciting. We're a peaceful agricultural world. Our primary exports are grains and textiles. The population is stable at about 80 million. We have no military conflicts, no famines, no plagues. Honestly, we're rather boring by galactic standards. And your founding? Your world's origins? Aaron nodded enthusiastically. That's actually quite interesting. We don't know much about the original colonists. About 300 years ago, there was what we call the Great Silence, a period where all records were lost or corrupted. When our ancestors emerged from that period, they had to rebuild society from scratch. They rebuilt without any memory of before. Exactly. Isn't that fascinating? We have all these ancient structures, the cathedrals, the monuments, but no real understanding of their original purpose. We've theorized that perhaps the colonists were fleeing some catastrophe and suffered memory loss due to warp exposure. It's the only explanation that makes sense. Valdane leaned forward. Governor, I need you to think very carefully. Do you have any memory, any at all, of the God Emperor of mankind? Aaron's smile faltered slightly. That's the second time someone's mentioned this emperor today. Inquisitor, who is he? Some sort of galactic leader? We've maintained peaceful relations with all Imperial vessels that have visited our system. How can you maintain relations with the Imperium without knowing the Emperor? Well, we follow the laws, pay our tithes, accept Imperial currency. We've always assumed the Emperor was simply an administrative title. You know, like governor or magistrate. Is he someone specific? I couldn't stay silent anymore. Your Excellency, look around you. Really look. The statues, the carvings, the images everywhere. You see them, don't you? Aaron looked confused, but humored me. His eyes swept across the chamber, passing over a 10-meter-tall statue of the Emperor in his crusade armor. I see the chamber, yes. Beautiful architecture. Very old. Some decorative carvings on the walls, though they've weathered over time. Why do you ask? The statue, I said, pointing directly at it. Right there. 20 tons of gold and marble. You're telling me you don't see it? Aaron followed my finger, his gaze passing through the statue as if it were air. I see the wall, interrogator. I'm afraid I don't understand what you're referring to. Valdane and I exchanged glances. This was worse than we'd imagined. It wasn't that they'd forgotten the Emperor. They literally couldn't perceive him anymore. We spent the next 3 days conducting interviews across Prima Devotion. Every citizen told the same story. The world had been founded 300 years ago by colonists emerging from the Great Silence. Everything before that was lost history. None of them could see the imperial iconography. When we pointed directly at statues of the Emperor, their eyes would focus on the space around it, but never on the statue itself. When we showed them imperial texts with the Emperor's name, their eyes would skip over those passages as if the words weren't there. But here's what made it truly terrifying. They were thriving. Crime was virtually non-existent. The people were healthy, educated, productive. They'd maintained all the infrastructure and technology. They'd even improved on some of it. Agricultural yields were up 30% from historical norms. Education scores were the highest in the sector. Without faith in the Emperor, without the Ecclesiarchy's guidance, without the fear of the Inquisition or the threat of damnation, They'd created a paradise. On the fourth day, Valdane ordered me to join him in what had once been the Cathedral of Eternal Vigilance. The building could hold 500,000 worshippers in its grand nave. Now it stood empty except for a few citizens using it as a meeting hall. We walked to the central altar, where once upon a time millions had taken communion and pledged their souls to the Emperor. "Tell me what you see," Valdane said quietly. I looked around. "I see a magnificent cathedral, Gothic architecture from the early Crusade period, stained glass windows depicting the Emperor's great victories, the Unity Wars, the Ulanor Crusade, the triumph at Gyros Thravian. The altar is carved from a single piece of Terran marble, transported here at unimaginable cost. Every surface is covered in prayers and devotionals. And what do the citizens see? A large building, empty space, historical architecture with no meaning." Valdane nodded slowly. 3 days ago I performed an experiment. I brought a citizen here, a woman who'd been a shrine keeper before the silence. I asked her to read the text carved into that pillar. He pointed to a massive column covered in high Gothic scripture. She read the first line perfectly. "In his name, we find strength." Then her voice faltered. She looked confused. I asked her to read it again. She read, "In the name of community, we find strength." The word his had changed to community in her perception. "That's impossible," I said. "I thought so too." So I had her copy the text onto parchment, word for word. I watched her do it. She copied it perfectly, every letter correct. Then I asked her to read what she'd just written, and she read, "In the name of community, we find strength." Some kind of psychic conditioning? A mimetic virus? That was my first thought. But our psychers detect no warp interference. Our tech priests find no biological or chemical agents. The planetary population is completely healthy by every measure. Valdane sat heavily on the altar steps, a blasphemy that would have earned him execution on any other world. "I think," he said slowly, "that this is what humanity looks like without the Emperor. We found the answer in the planetary archives, 3 levels below the governor's palace. The archives were sealed behind 3 meters of adamantium and protected by security systems that would have shamed a Forge World's vaults. Whatever had happened here, someone had wanted the truth preserved. It took our tech priest 2 days to bypass the locks without destroying what lay within. Inside, we found records. Not data slates or cogitator files, but actual physical books, bound in leather, written in careful script. As if someone had known that electronic records could be altered or erased, but paper and ink would endure. The first journal we found was dated 10,037 years after the Emperor's ascension to the Golden Throne. It was written by Ecclesiarch Dominicus, the highest religious authority on Sanctum Fortunae at that time. I'm going to read you some of it, because you need to understand what happened here. The pilgrim arrived today. He gave no name, claimed no chapter or order. He simply appeared at the cathedral gates and asked to speak with me about faith. I granted him audience because there was something about him. A weight, an age beyond mortal years. When he looked at me, I felt as if the stars themselves were watching. He told me he was a traveler, that he'd walked among humanity since before the Imperium, before the Emperor, before the Age of Strife. He claimed to have seen the rise and fall of civilizations beyond counting. I should have called the guards, should have reported him to the Inquisition, but I listened instead, and he told me something that shook my faith to its very foundations. "Do you know," he asked, "what the Emperor was before he became your god?" "He was always our god," I replied, "from the moment he united Terra and began the Great Crusade." "No," the pilgrim said. "Before that, long before that." "Do you know what he was?" I admitted I did not. He was like me, a perpetual, An immortal human who'd lived through the age of strife, through old night, through the rise and fall of the dark age of technology. He was powerful, yes, a psyker beyond compare. But he was not divine. I called this heresy. But the pilgrim continued. The Emperor made a choice. He saw humanity tearing itself apart, falling to chaos, destroying itself through ignorance and fear. So he decided to become what humanity needed. Not a man, but a symbol. Not a leader, but a god. He allowed the faith to grow. Encouraged it even, though he'd spent millennia fighting against religion. Because he knew that humanity needed something to believe in, something to unite behind, something to die for. But here's what the Emperor knew, and what your ecclesiarchy has forgotten. Faith in him was never meant to be eternal. It was a crutch. Training wheels for a species learning to walk again after the fall. Humanity was supposed to outgrow him. I asked what he meant. The Emperor wanted humanity to become psychically mature. The pilgrim explained. To master the warp not through worship or superstition, but through understanding. He wanted his sons, the Primarchs, to guide humanity to that future. A future where faith in gods was unnecessary because humanity had transcended the need for gods. But the heresy happened. Half his sons fell. His grand plan collapsed. And humanity, faced with the horror of chaos, retreated further into faith. Made him more than he'd ever intended to be. Trapped him on a throne, sustained by the sacrifice of thousands of psychers daily, because the faith was too strong to let him die or evolve into whatever he was meant to become. 10,000 years, the pilgrim said. 10,000 years of stagnation. Of humanity's potential being slowly consumed to maintain a dying god who never wanted to be a god in the first place. I asked him why he was telling me this. Because Sanctum Fortunae is special, he said. This world represents pure faith undiluted by politics or war. If any world could let go of the Emperor and survive, it would be this one. Let go? I was horrified. Watch what happens, he said, when humanity stops pouring its psychic energy into maintaining a corpse on a throne. Watch what happens when people live for themselves instead of dying for a god. Watch, Ecclesiarch, and then decide whether faith is really what's best for your species. He left after that. I ordered him arrested, but he was never found. That was 3 days ago. Today I conducted services as normal. But I couldn't stop thinking about his words. And as I led the prayers, as I watched 80 million souls cry out to a distant god, I wondered, what if he's right? What if we've been praying to a prison instead of a savior? The journal continued for several more entries, documenting Ecclesiarch Dominicus's growing doubt. His careful research into pre-imperial history, his discovery of sealed records from the Great Crusade that suggested the Emperor had indeed rejected worship, and then came the final entry. I have made my decision. Tomorrow I will perform a ritual. Not a prayer, but an unbinding. I will release Sanctum Fortunae from the Emperor's light, cut the psychic threads that bind this world to him. I don't know what will happen. Perhaps we will all fall to chaos without his protection. Perhaps demons will consume us. Perhaps the very act will tear reality apart. Or perhaps we will finally see what humanity can become when it stops waiting for salvation and creates it for itself. If anyone reads this after I am gone, know that I did this not from hate but from love. Love for the species the Emperor tried to save. Love for the potential he saw in us. The Emperor gave us faith to survive the darkness. But maybe it's time we learn to make our own light. May he forgive me, or may he thank me. The next page was blank. But at the bottom, in different handwriting, someone had written a single line. Day 1, after the silence, we do not remember why, but we feel lighter. We found Ecclesiarch Dominicus's body in a sealed chamber beneath the cathedral. He'd been dead for exactly 300 years, lying in state, perfectly preserved by stasis fields. Around him were arranged 7 other bodies. His closest advisors, I guessed. They'd performed the ritual together. The chamber walls were covered in psychic circuitry, patterns drawn in consecrated oils and blessed salts, forming a mandala so complex it made my eyes water to look at it. At the center was a single phrase in High Gothic, repeated 1,000 times in an ever-tightening spiral. Let them go. Valdane studied the mandala for a long time. Finally he spoke. They severed this world's connection to the Emperor, not through chaos, not through corruption, through pure psychic force and absolute conviction. They believed so completely that humanity didn't need him anymore, that they made it true. But how is that possible? I asked. The Emperor's light protects us from the warp. Without it, demons should have poured through immediately. Look at the patterns, Valdane said, pointing to the outer rings of the mandala. They didn't remove the protection. They redirected it. Instead of faith in the Emperor protecting them, they made faith in humanity itself the shield. Collective human will, focused through community and cooperation, replacing the need for a god. That's heresy, is it? Valdane turned to me. The Emperor spent thousands of years fighting against religion. He promoted reason, science, human potential. Only after Monarchia did he accept worship, and only because Lorgar and the Word-bearers left him no choice. Maybe this is what he actually wanted all along. You can't believe that. I don't know what I believe anymore, Valdane admitted. But I know what I see. A human world thriving without faith in the Emperor. Peaceful, productive, happy. Everything the Imperium claims to want for humanity. Achieved by forgetting the very foundation the Imperium is built upon. He looked back at Dominicus's body. They prayed for 10,000 years. Every man, woman, and child on this world poured their faith into him. And one day, their highest priest asked, what if we stopped? What if we used that same energy to believe in ourselves instead? And it worked. It worked. Valdane spent the next week in the archives reading everything Dominicus had written. I continued interviewing citizens, documenting the extent of their collective amnesia. But on the 8th day, something changed. A woman came to our quarters. She was young, maybe 25, wearing simple work clothes. She looked terrified. Please, she said. I need to speak with you. About the Emperor. Valdane and I exchanged glances. This was the first citizen who'd said that name. You know who the Emperor is? I asked carefully. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I remembered. 3 days ago, I was walking past the cathedral and I saw it. Actually saw it. The statue of him in golden armor. And suddenly I remembered everything. The prayers, the services, the faith. It all came flooding back. How is that possible? I don't know, she sobbed. Everyone else still can't see, still doesn't remember, but I do. And it's driving me mad. I walk past people I've known my whole life and they're living these happy, peaceful lives, and I remember what we lost. What we gave up. Valdane sat her down gently. Tell me, is your life better now or before? She was quiet for a long time. Now, she finally whispered. God help me, but now. Before I was terrified every moment. Terrified of heresy, of impurity, of failing the Emperor. I spent 3 hours every day in prayer, begging for salvation I never felt I deserved. I watched my brother executed for doubting a single line of scripture. She looked up at us with haunted eyes. Now I work as a teacher. I help children learn to read, to think, to question. I have friends who love me for who I am, not how perfectly I recite catechisms. I look at the stars and feel wonder instead of fear. But you remember the Emperor? Yes. And part of me wants to go back. Wants to believe again. Because faith was certainty. And certainty felt like safety even when it was a cage. She stood up. That's why I came to you, to ask, what do I do? Do I try to make others remember? Do I keep this terrible knowledge to myself? Do I try to forget again? Valdane was quiet for a long moment. I don't know, he said finally. I honestly don't know. On the 9th day, Lord Valdane called me to his quarters. I've written my report, he said, handing me a data slate. I read it carefully. It was comprehensive, documenting everything we'd discovered. The ritual, the collective amnesia, the thriving society that had grown in the absence of faith. But at the end, where he should have made his recommendation to the Ordo Hereticus, there was only one line. Recommend immediate quarantine of Sanctum Fortunae. No further investigation warranted, sir, I said carefully. This is incomplete. No, Valdane said quietly. It's exactly complete. We quarantine the world. We list it as contaminated by unknown psychic phenomena. We prevent anyone else from discovering what we found here. But the ecclesiarchy will demand, the ecclesiarchy will be told that investigation is ongoing, and the world remains under observation. They will not be allowed to land. No one will. I stared at him. You're covering this up. I'm preserving a miracle, he corrected. Or a heresy. I'm not sure which. Maybe both. He walked to the window, looking out over Prima Devotion. Citizens walked the streets below, going about their lives, unburdened by the weight of eternal faith. For 10,000 years, the Imperium has claimed that humanity needs the Emperor to survive, that without him, we would fall to chaos or xenos or our own darkness. And maybe that's true for most of humanity. Maybe faith is necessary for people living in Hive Cities, fighting endless wars, staring into the abyss every day. But here, he continued, on this one world we have proof that it's not universal, that humanity can thrive without him. That maybe, just maybe, the Emperor's real gift to us wasn't salvation through worship, but the potential to save ourselves. The Inquisition will never accept that. I know. That's why they can never know. If this gets out, if other worlds try to replicate what happened here, the Imperium will tear itself apart. Billions will die in the chaos. The faith that holds humanity together will shatter. He turned back to me. So we quarantine this world. We tell no one what we really found, and we let this experiment continue in secret. Maybe in 1,000 years or 10,000 it will fail. Maybe chaos will find a way in. Maybe the citizens will rediscover faith on their own. Or maybe, he said softly, maybe this is the seed of what humanity was supposed to become. I'm recording this 3 years after we left Sanctum Fortunae. The world remains under quarantine. Lord Valdane files regular reports describing ongoing investigation of psychic contamination. The ecclesiarchy has tried twice to send missions to the surface. Both were turned back by inquisitorial order. The last passing survey ship reported that the population has grown to 85 million. Agricultural output continues to increase. There have been no conflicts, no famines, no plagues. The citizens of Sanctum Fortunae live in peace, having forgotten the God Emperor of mankind, and they thrive. I think about that woman who remembered, the one who carried the terrible burden of knowing what everyone else had forgotten. I wonder if she ever found peace with her knowledge, or if she spent the rest of her life torn between two realities. I think I understand how she felt, because I carry that burden now too. I know something I can never speak about. I've seen something that contradicts everything the Imperium stands for. I've seen what happens when humanity forgets the Emperor, and it's beautiful. So let me ask you something. What if the Emperor's greatest gift to humanity wasn't his leadership, or his power, or his eternal vigil on the golden throne? What if his greatest gift was showing us what we could become, and then giving us the choice to believe we needed him forever, or to believe we could eventually stand on our own? What if the faith that holds the Imperium together is both our greatest strength and our greatest weakness? What if 10,000 psychers die every day to keep the Emperor alive, not because he's protecting us, but because our faith won't let him rest? What if Sanctum Fortunae isn't heresy, but hope? I don't have answers. I'm not sure anyone does. But I know this. Somewhere in the galaxy, on a world now locked away from the rest of humanity, 85 million people live their lives in peace. They raise their children without fear. They look at the stars with wonder instead of dread. They face each day knowing that their salvation comes from themselves, not from a distant god. They've forgotten the Emperor, and they've never been more human. I need to tell you something else. Something I discovered in my final review of Ecclesiarch Dominicus's journals, buried in the last pages he ever wrote. The pilgrim who visited him, the one who claimed to be a perpetual, who told Dominicus about the Emperor's true nature. Dominicus described him in detail. His appearance, his mannerisms, the way he spoke, and those descriptions match historical records I've seen in the inquisitorial archives. Records of individuals who appeared throughout imperial history at crucial moments, always appearing to leaders in crisis, always asking questions, always pushing humanity to think beyond faith. I think I know who the pilgrim was. I think the Emperor himself visited Sanctum Fortunae 300 years ago. I think he looked at this world of pure faith, this planet that had worshipped him without question for 10,000 years, and he told them the truth, not to destroy their faith, but to test it, to see if humanity was finally ready to grow beyond needing him. And when Dominicus severed Sanctum Fortunae from the Emperor's light, when he released those 80 million souls from the burden of faith, I don't think it was against the Emperor's will. I think it was exactly what he wanted. Sanctum Fortunae remains under quarantine. Its people continue to thrive, unaware of the Imperium that surrounds them, forgetting more of their history with each passing year. In a few more generations, even the name Emperor will be completely lost. They'll look at the ancient cathedrals and see only beautiful architecture. They'll walk past statues of him in golden armor and see empty spaces. And they'll keep building their paradise, never knowing that their greatest rebellion was achieved not through war or heresy, but through simple, complete forgetting. The Imperium will continue as it always has. Trillions will pray to the God Emperor. Billions will die in his name. The Great Crusade will grind on for another 10,000 years. But on one small world, locked away from the rest of humanity, a different future exists. A future where humans don't need gods, where faith in each other is enough, where forgetting the Emperor was the first step to remembering what humanity could be. Is that heresy? Or is that hope? I don't know anymore. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the Emperor's greatest teaching isn't worship me forever. Maybe it's believe in yourselves enough to let me go. This is Interrogator Marcus Vale, signing off. If you're watching this, if you've heard this story, I need you to ask yourself one question. If you could forget the Emperor, if you could wake up tomorrow free from the weight of 10,000 years of faith and fear and obligation, would you be brave enough to let go? Or would you cling to your chains because at least they're familiar? The citizens of Sanctum Fortunae chose to let go, and they've never been happier. Think about that. Think about what it means, and decide for yourself whether what happened on Sanctum Fortunae was the Imperium's greatest tragedy or its greatest hope.